Hi everyone in Chafin Land, and welcome to Environmental Issues of Europe. Make sure that you have your guided notes nearby, something to write with, and you are ready to go. Let's get started. So, environmental issues are part of our geographic understandings. They are a standard, so we need to be able to explain the environmental issues in Europe, and then it lists what those are, and we're going to go through them now. So the first one is acid rain in Germany. And this is a very happy picture for such a terrible. So what is acid rain? Well, acid rain is the result of air pollution. The burning of fossil fuels releases chemicals that mix with water in the clouds, and then rain falls from the clouds as a very, very weak acid. It won't burn your skin. It's not like that. But it's very harmful for the environment. So the effects of acid rain. It pollutes lakes, rivers, and streams. It harms trees, plants, and aquatic life, things that live in water. It damages buildings and stoneworks over time, not immediately, because again, it's a very weak acid. This is some effect of acid rain on trees. You can see some in the background and even a little up here in the foreground still have needles or leaves, but these others have nothing. It affects the aquatic life like fish. It can affect the products of trees, so like fruits. The one on the left, this is from a fir tree. The one on the left is affected by acid rain. You can see how it's yellowed and dry looking in most of it, and then the one on the right is not affected by acid rain. It is healthy. So sulfur dioxide and oxides of nitrogen in acid rain damage the shine and texture of stone monuments and carvings. But again, this happens over a period of time. It does not happen immediately. And it is not the same as erosion. It is not water washing some of these things away. It is the chemical eating into the stone. Here's another example. This is a shrine that used to have a lot more detail. We're looking specifically at acid rain in Germany. So acid rain has destroyed nearly half of Germany's black forest. That's just its name. And this has harmed Germany's economy because one of its major natural resources is timber or wood. So this is part of the Black Forest. And again, you can see some trees that look perfectly healthy and others that are not looking good at all. Now, what is causing the acid rain specifically in Germany? Well, the main source of acid rain is pollution from the factories. Cars and buses also produce harmful gases. And sulfur deposits from Germany are carried through the air, causing acid rain in other countries. So we have some pictures and some diagrams to look at. So you can see on the left the pictures that show the smokestacks from factories sending smoke and chemical emissions into the air. On the right, these diagrams, it's showing you that the smoke from those factories in the UK and Germany and the Netherlands gets carried by the wind over to Sweden and Norway and comes down as acid rain. This also happens in the US and gets carried by the wind to Canada, which causes acid rain. Or from China to Korea, same thing. This is another drawing explaining it. But again, in this case, we have the factories. We also have the vehicle emissions. All of this contributes. It puts sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide into the air, which goes up into the clouds, mixes with the water in the clouds, and creates sulfuric and nitric acids, and comes down in acid particles and gases. So we can have acid rain, but there's even acid snow. Another drawing. But in this case, it's showing us how the wind carries it, and the wind can take it hundreds of miles where it falls as acid rain and affects an area that doesn't have any of these pollutants around it. So what are some solutions to the problem? Well, plants that use water power are replacing many coal-burning factories. And I want to make sure that you understand that when we say plants in this case, we're not talking about plants that grow. We're talking about like power plants. So factories that use water power are replacing some of the coal-burning factories. The German government has also passed laws to reduce emissions from cars and factories. And the government is encouraging people to use public transportation, so buses and trains, so there aren't so many cars on the road. We are going to watch this quick acid rain animation. Let's move on to air pollution in the United Kingdom. So London, the capital of the UK, is famous for air pollution. That is not a great thing to be famous for. And the word smog was first used in 1905 to describe air in London, which smog is a combination of smoke and fog. Thick London smog happens when water mixes with smoke particles from a coal fire. They used to use a lot of coal for heating and cooking in the UK. So you can see the smog in all of these pictures. All of these are in and around London. Now there was something called the Great Smog of 1952. There was very dense smog for 4 days. You could hardly see a few inches in front of your face. Transportation slowed down because people couldn't see where they were going. Crime increased because, again, people couldn't see what was happening. And a lot of people died. They either died from respiratory illnesses from the smog, or in some cases, again, because there were people trying to use transportation, people got run over by cars. They couldn't see the cars coming. The cars couldn't see them. There began to be a worldwide concern about air quality. So this is from the Great Smog. So you can see that it looks just very, very dark. And while you can see, I think you know that in fog, a lot of times you can see right around you, but you can't see very far beyond you. And so that's kind of what happened with this smog, although it was even hard to see very far in front of you. So the effects of air pollution in the UK. Again, it damages vegetation, things that grow. It harms the atmosphere. it harms human health, and it causes acid rain. So we've seen this diagram before, but the United Kingdom's air pollution causes problems for nearby countries because the air pollution is carried by wind. So what are the solutions to this problem? Well, the government has set up smokeless zones. So this is not just places where you cannot smoke cigarettes, which is a good plan, but also areas where there cannot be this type of smoke from coal fires. And laws have forced automakers to build vehicles that produce less harmful exhaust. And they're starting to use cleaner burning fuels, which has reduced the air pollution. All right, so our last environmental issue is the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, Ukraine. The disaster began during a systems test on Saturday, April 26, 1986, at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl power plant, which is near the city of Pripyat. Now you need to understand, when we talk about nuclear, a lot of times people think that that only means nuclear weapons. This was nuclear power, okay? So this was a power plant. It produced electricity. So during this test, a sudden power surge caused an explosion that sent a cloud of radioactive material into the atmosphere. So if you look at this map over here, now the cloud was not like a mushroom cloud like you see from Nagasaki or Hiroshima. It was not that kind of, again, because we're not talking about nuclear weapons. But it was an explosion, and so it did send this cloud that you really could not see, but it spread over lots of area. The cloud drifted over large parts of the Soviet Union and Europe. On the left, you're looking down into the reactor area where it exploded. And this was not long after, when there's still smoke coming out of it. And on the right, you can see the crane here. They were starting to build what they call a concrete and lead sarcophagus. They were building a big concrete and lead box to put over this to keep radioactivity from escaping, but this is what was left afterward. So steps that were taken to limit contamination. So several attempts were made to clear away and contain radioactive solids at the site. So they couldn't do a whole lot about the cloud or the small particles that went up into the atmosphere, but there were solid pieces that they were trying to clear away or put or contain in some safe area. And they did this at first by sending in volunteers to gather this stuff up. Volunteers could only be in the area for 90 seconds or less because it was that dangerous. The radiation levels at the time were 15,000 times greater than a person's normal exposure in a year. I want you to understand that we are exposed to radiation from your microwave oven, from your cell phone, from your computer, from your TV. We're exposed to tiny, tiny, tiny amounts of radiation all of the time. But this was a lot more radiation. Any movable objects near the plant were buried. That included cars, trucks, and even topsoil, so even the top layer of the soil. Roughly 60,000 buildings had to be washed with a chemical solution, and some roofs had to be replaced. A special solution was sprayed on streets and walkways to prevent radioactive dust from blowing around, also from getting on people's shoes or clothes. Trees that were affected were cut down and buried in concrete pits. Now, the consequences of this disaster. So in the first months, and we're talking about the first 4 months after the accident, 28 emergency workers died of radiation poisoning. People living near Chernobyl have had higher incidences, lots higher incidences of cancer and birth defects. Many animals died or suffered damage. And fish in nearby rivers were unsafe to eat for many years. Millions of acres of farmland were poisoned, so they couldn't even grow food safely. 350,400 people were evacuated from affected areas of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. So a lot of people were moved away from their home, and people who lived in this area of Pripyat in Ukraine, they did not know that they could, in many cases, never return home. So an official exclusion zone around the plant remains in place. So they've created this area that's kind of a no man's land. Nobody's allowed there. It extends for 18 miles in all directions, and it is one of the most radioactive spots on Earth. It's still very dangerous. You may see documentaries. There are some where people take people in on tours. That is not safe. So the effect on other countries of the nuclear disaster, well, nearly 9 tons of radioactive material, that's 90 times as much as the bomb at Hiroshima, were hurled into the sky. They exploded into the sky. Winds over the following days, mostly blowing north and west, carried fallout, okay, so small particles that literally fell to the ground, into Belarus, as well as Russia, Poland, and other countries around the world. And so this tan area covers everything, everywhere that it went. And that's all. So go back and view the video again if you need to finish your notes, and always feel free to ask any clarifying questions. Please remember, always, that you are seen, you are known, you are cared for, and you are loved.